Sarah McAllister's fingers trembled as she held out her wedding ring to the shopkeeper. 3 weeks of walking. 3 weeks of eating once a day. 3 weeks of being called worthless, barren, a burden. "Please," she whispered. "Just bread. Anything." The shopkeeper laughed and pushed the ring back across the counter. "Gold don't fill bellies here, ma'am. Try begging somewhere else." She'd lost her husband, lost her home, lost her dignity. Now she was about to lose the last piece of him she had left. Then the door opened behind her. Before we continue this story, I invite you to subscribe to our channel and follow Sarah's journey to the very end. Comment below with the city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story travels. Now let's return to that desperate moment in the general store. The summer heat pressed down on Copper Creek, Wyoming, like a punishment from God himself. Sarah McAllister stood at the counter of Harrison's general store, her worn boots leaving dust prints on the wooden floor. She could feel the stares of the other customers boring into her back. A widow? A stranger? A woman with nothing? "I said no." Mr. Harrison crossed his arms over his barrel chest. "Take your gold somewhere else." "It's real gold." Sarah's voice cracked. She hated how weak she sounded. "My husband saved for months to buy this ring. It's worth more than..." "Worth more than what?" Harrison snorted. "Look around you, ma'am. This ain't Philadelphia. Out here, gold don't mean nothing if you can't eat it or shoot it." A woman near the fabric bolts whispered something to her companion. They both laughed. Sarah's cheeks burned with shame, but she kept her chin up. She'd promised herself she wouldn't cry. Not here. Not in front of strangers who'd already decided she was worthless. "Just a loaf of bread," she tried again. "Or some cornmeal. I'll work for it. I can sew. I can..." "We got a seamstress already." Harrison waved his hand dismissively. "Now move along. You're holding up paying customers." Sarah's stomach clenched. She hadn't eaten properly in 4 days. The last of her money had gone to a stagecoach ticket that only took her halfway. She'd walked the rest, sleeping in barns when farmers took pity on her, under trees when they didn't. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the only other thing she had left. A silver needle, its surface worn smooth from years of use. Her mother-in-law's needle. The woman had pressed it into Sarah's palm on her deathbed, whispering, "You were the daughter I always wanted. Don't let my son's family take that from you." 2 weeks later, Thomas was dead from typhoid fever, and his family had taken everything else. "This," Sarah said, laying the needle on the counter beside the ring, "it's sterling silver. Belonged to my husband's mother. Please, I'm begging you." Harrison picked up the needle, examined it, then tossed it back. "Lady, I don't know what kind of trouble you're running from, but it ain't my problem. Now get out before I call the sheriff." The door swung open. Heavy boots on the wooden floor. Sarah didn't turn around. She was too focused on keeping herself from collapsing. "Problem here, Harrison." The voice was deep and quiet, the kind of voice that didn't need to be loud to command attention. "No problem, Mr. Thornton." Harrison's tone changed instantly, becoming almost respectful. "Just explaining to this lady that we don't run a charity." "That's so." Sarah finally turned. The man who'd entered was tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-weathered features that spoke of years under open sky. His clothes were practical but well-maintained canvas pants, a blue work shirt, leather vest. A rancher, she guessed. Not a townsman, but not a drifter either. His eyes, the color of storm clouds, took in her travel-stained dress and hollow cheeks with one quick glance. She saw no pity there, just assessment, calculation. "Ma'am?" He touched the brim of his hat. "I was just leaving," Sarah said, reaching for her ring and needle. Her hand shook with the effort of maintaining composure. "Hold on." The man Thornton stepped closer. "That's a wedding band." "Yes." "And that needle." "Sterling silver, my mother-in-law's." He was quiet for a moment, studying her face. Sarah forced herself to meet his gaze. She wouldn't look away. She wouldn't show weakness. Not anymore. Harrison, Thornton said, still looking at Sarah. Give her whatever provisions she needs. Put it on my account. The shopkeeper's eyebrows shot up. Now, Mr. Thornton, I don't think— My account. There was no room for argument in his voice. Sarah's throat tightened. I don't need charity. Didn't offer any. Thornton turned to face her fully. I'm offering work. My father's ranch is about 5 miles north. We need someone to manage the house. Cooking, mending, keeping things running. The woman who did it before got married and moved to Colorado 2 months ago. You don't know anything about me. I know you're hungry, but you ain't begging. I know you're desperate, but you ain't crying. I know you'd rather starve than give up that ring and needle. He paused. That tells me enough. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. This was insane. She didn't know this man. Didn't know anything about his ranch, or his father, or what kind of work managing the house really meant. But she also knew she had no other options. None that didn't end with her dead in a ditch somewhere between here and nowhere. What's the pay? She asked. Something like approval flickered in his eyes. Room, board, and fair wages. You'll have your own quarters. Private. My father and I will treat you with respect, and so will the hands. Anyone who doesn't answers to me. The woman near the fabric bolts whispered again. This time, Sarah caught the words, Thornton's desperate enough to take in strays now. Thornton's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. Instead, he kept his focus on Sarah. What do you say, ma'am? I ain't got all day. Sarah looked at the ring in her palm. Thomas had slipped it on her finger 3 years ago, his eyes bright with hope and love and all the promises young people make when they don't know what's coming. She looked at the needle. Margaret Thornton, no relation to this man, just a coincidence of names, had given it to her, with the last of her strength choosing her daughter-in-law over her own blood. Both items represented the past. A past that had kicked her out, called her worthless, left her starving in a general store in the middle of Wyoming. Maybe it was time to stop clinging to what was and start reaching for what could be. My name is Sarah McAllister, she said. And yes, Mr. Thornton, I accept. The wagon ride to the ranch was quiet. Thornton Caleb, he'd told her to call him, handled the horses with easy competence, his attention on the road. Sarah sat beside him, clutching the basket of provisions Harrison had grudgingly packed. You're staring, Caleb said without looking at her. Sarah quickly turned her gaze to the prairie stretching before them. Endless grass golden in the summer heat, rippling like waves under the Wyoming wind. I was wondering why you helped me. Already told you. We need someone to manage the house. You could have hired anyone, someone local, someone you know. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was lower, rougher. Local folks talk too much, know too much. Sometimes a stranger is exactly what a place needs. There was something in his tone, something heavy wounded, that told Sarah not to push further, at least not yet. Your father, she said instead. What should I know about him? Caleb's hands tightened on the reins. He has good days and bad days. His memory ain't what it used to be. Sometimes he forgets where he is. Sometimes he forgets who I am. I'm sorry. Don't be. He's still my father. Still the man who built that ranch with his bare hands. Caleb's jaw worked. He just gets confused sometimes. Might call you by my mother's name, Eleanor. She passed 2 years ago. Sarah nodded slowly. And if he does, just be patient with him. He don't mean nothing by it. He just misses her something fierce. They rode in silence for a while longer. The sun beat down mercilessly, and Sarah could feel sweat trickling down her back. But she didn't complain. After weeks of uncertainty, she was heading somewhere. That was more than she'd had this morning. Can I ask you something? Caleb said suddenly. Depends on what it is. Fair enough? He paused. What happened to your husband? The question hit her like a physical blow. She'd been expecting it, but that didn't make it easier. Typhoid fever. He was a doctor in Philadelphia. Caught it from a patient he was trying to save. And his family. Sarah's hands clenched in her lap. They blamed me. For the fever. For not giving him children. The words came out bitter, harder than she'd intended. We tried for 2 years. Nothing. When Thomas died, his brother and father decided I wasn't worth keeping around. Said I was useless, a burden. They took the house, the savings, everything Thomas left me. Her voice cracked. Said a barren woman didn't deserve any of it. Caleb was quiet for a long time. Sarah waited for the judgment, the pity, the uncomfortable silence that always followed when she told this story. Instead, he said, they were wrong. 3 words. Simple. Direct. Said with absolute certainty. Sarah blinked back tears. You don't know that. I know that a woman's worth ain't measured by what she can or can't produce. Caleb's voice was firm. That's cattle thinking, and you ain't cattle, Mrs. McAllister. No one had ever said that to her before, not in those words, not with that conviction. Thank you, she whispered. Caleb nodded once. We're almost there. The Thornton Ranch spread across the valley like a promise. A main house sturdy and well-built, a large barn, a bunkhouse for the hands, fenced pastures where cattle grazed lazily in the summer heat. Smoke rose from the chimney, and Sarah could hear the distant lowing of animals, the occasional shout of men at work. It wasn't grand, not by Eastern standards, but against the vast emptiness of the prairie, it looked like civilization itself. Welcome to your new home, Caleb said. Such as it is. Before Sarah could respond, the front door of the main house opened. A man emerged, older, grayer, but bearing the same lean build as his son. His eyes, though, were different. Clouded with confusion, one moment, sharp with recognition the next. Caleb. He squinted at the wagon. Who's that with you? This is Mrs. McAllister Pye. Caleb jumped down and helped Sarah from her seat. She's going to be managing the house for us. Ezra Thornton studied Sarah with an intensity that made her want to look away. Then his face softened, and something like wonder filled his expression. Eleanor, he breathed. Eleanor, is that you? Sarah's heart broke a little. She glanced at Caleb, who gave her a small nod. No, Mr. Thornton, she said gently. My name is Sarah. I'm here to help. Ezra blinked, and the confusion cleared for a moment. Sarah? Yes. Yes, of course. He reached out and took her hand in both of his. Welcome, Sarah. It's been too long since we had a woman's touch in this house. Thank you, sir. None of that sir business. Ezra patted her hand. Call me Ezra. We don't stand on ceremony here. He looked at his son. She's got kind eyes, Caleb. Like your mother. I know, Pa. Sarah felt something loosen in her chest. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, she didn't feel like a burden. She felt wanted. The kitchen was worse than she'd expected. Sarah stood in the doorway, taking in the disaster. Dirty dishes piled in the sink. Flour scattered across the counter. A scorched pot abandoned on the cold stove. Dust coated every surface, and the smell of old grease hung in the air. I know it's a sight. Caleb appeared behind her, looking almost embarrassed. The hands tried their best, but... It's fine. Sarah interrupted, already rolling up her sleeves. I've seen worse. She hadn't, but she wasn't about to say that. I'll need water heated for cleaning, she said briskly, and someone to show me where everything's kept. I'll fetch the water. Caleb was already moving. Your room's through there, used to be the pantry, but Ma had it converted. It's small, but it's private. Sarah peeked through the indicated door. A narrow bed, a washstand, a single window looking out toward the barn. Simple. Clean. Hers. "It's perfect," she said. Caleb paused at the pump. "How many people am I cooking for?" "6 hands plus Pa and me, sometimes more during roundup." "When do they eat?" "Supper's at 6 sharp, breakfast at 5. He hesitated. "I know it's a lot to ask starting tomorrow." "I'll manage." He studied her for a moment. That assessing look again, like he was trying to figure out what she was made of. Whatever he saw seemed to satisfy him because he nodded once. "I believe you will, Mrs. McAllister." By the time the sun began to set, Sarah had the kitchen in some semblance of order. She'd scrubbed every surface, organized the larder, and discovered a root cellar stocked with potatoes, onions, and preserved goods. Not fancy ingredients, but solid. She could work with this. The supper she prepared was simple beans, properly seasoned cornbread, and fried salt pork, but it was hot and plentiful. When the ranch hands filed in at 6 o'clock sharp, she saw the hope in their eyes. These were men who'd been eating their own cooking for too long. "Lord have mercy," said the youngest, a tow-headed boy of maybe 16. "Is that actual food?" "Jesse," Caleb said firmly, "mind your manners." "Sorry, sir. Sorry, ma'am." But the boy was grinning. "It's just, we ain't smelled nothing this good since—" He trailed off, glancing at Caleb. Since Mrs. Thornton died, Sarah understood. She pretended not to notice. "Sit down and eat," she said, "before it gets cold." They needed no further encouragement. 6 hands, plus Caleb and Ezra, descended on the food like starving wolves. Sarah served quickly and efficiently, keeping coffee cups filled, watching with satisfaction as serving platters emptied. Ezra sat at the head of the table, eating slowly, his eyes occasionally drifting to Sarah with that confused wonder. Once he murmured, "Eleanor, you outdid yourself tonight." Caleb tensed, but Sarah simply said, "Thank you, Mr. Thornton. I'm glad you're enjoying it." The old man smiled and returned to his meal, seemingly satisfied. After supper, as Sarah washed dishes, a presence appeared at her elbow. Jesse, the young hand, holding a dish towel. "Let me help, ma'am." "You don't have to." "I want to." He took a dripping plate from her hands. "That was the best meal I've had well, ever, I reckon. My ma died when I was 8. Pa wasn't much of a cook before he drank himself to death. Mr. Thornton took me in when I had nowhere else to go." Sarah's heart clenched. "I'm sorry about your parents." "It's all right. Thorntons are my family now." Jesse dried the plate carefully. "You're gonna fit in here, Mrs. McAllister. I can tell." "You can tell, can you?" "Sure." He grinned. "You got that look. The one that says you ain't gonna let nothing beat you." Sarah found herself smiling. For the first time in months, a real smile. "What look is that?" "The Thornton look." Jesse's grin widened. "Welcome to the family, ma'am." That night, as Sarah prepared for bed, she found a small bundle on her pillow, wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. She opened it carefully. Inside was a handful of wildflowers. Prairie roses, their pink petals slightly wilted from the heat. And tucked beneath them, a note in careful handwriting. "Thank you for staying. C.T." Sarah stood there for a long moment, holding the flowers. Such a small gesture. Such a simple kindness. But after weeks of rejection, of being told she was worthless, of being treated like a burden to be discarded, it meant everything. She found a small jar for the flowers and placed them on the windowsill. Then she sat on the narrow bed, pulling Thomas's ring from her pocket. "I think I'm going to be okay here," she whispered to the empty room. To the husband who couldn't hear her anymore. I think this might be where I'm supposed to be." She didn't put the ring away. Not yet. But she set it on the washstand beside the silver needle, both items gleaming in the lamplight. Pieces of the past. Yes. But maybe also pieces of a bridge to something new. Through the window she could see lights in the bunkhouse, hear the low rumble of men's voices. Somewhere Jesse was probably telling the others about the new cook. Somewhere Ezra was being helped to bed by his son. And somewhere Caleb Thornton was thinking about wildflowers and wounded women and second chances. Tomorrow would come early. 4 a.m. to start the fires. 5 o'clock for breakfast. A full day of cooking and cleaning and proving herself worthy of this chance she'd been given. But tonight, Sarah McAllister slept soundly for the first time in months. She dreamed of Philadelphia, of Thomas, of everything she'd lost. But mixed in with those old memories were new images, a kitchen filled with grateful voices, a confused old man calling her by his dead wife's name, a quiet rancher with storm-gray eyes who said her worth wasn't measured by what she could produce, and wildflowers, pink prairie roses blooming in impossible places. The first light of dawn was just touching the horizon when Sarah woke. She dressed quickly, pinned her hair back, and headed for the kitchen. There was work to be done, a life to rebuild. A family strange and broken and beautiful, waiting to be fed. She'd come to Copper Creek with nothing but a ring, a needle, and a heart full of grief. Maybe, just maybe, she'd found something worth staying for. The rooster crowed before the first light touched the horizon. Sarah was already at the stove, coffee brewing, strong biscuit dough rising in the warm kitchen. Her hands moved with purpose now, 3 weeks into this new life, and the rhythm felt almost natural. "You're up early again." She turned to find Caleb in the doorway, hat in hand, looking like he hadn't slept. "Couldn't sleep," she said. "Thought I'd get a head start." "You always get a head start." He stepped inside, and she noticed the tension in his shoulders, the tight line of his jaw. "Pa had a bad night. Kept calling for Ma. Took me 2 hours to calm him down." Sarah's heart ached. She'd heard Ezra's cries through the thin walls, heard Caleb's low voice trying to soothe him. "I could help, if you'd let me. It ain't your burden to carry. Maybe I want to carry it." Caleb looked at her, then really looked, and something shifted in his expression. "Why?" "Because your father called me Eleanor again yesterday. And when he did, he smiled like he hadn't smiled in years." Sarah wiped her hands on her apron. "That smile is worth a few sleepless nights." Before Caleb could respond, the kitchen door banged open. Jessie burst in, eyes wide, breathing hard. "Mr. Thornton, riders coming from the north. 4 of them. And one looks like Silas Morgan." Caleb's entire demeanor changed. His hand dropped to the pistol at his hip, and his voice went cold as winter. "Stay inside, both of you." "Caleb." "I mean it, Sarah." He was already moving toward the door. "Morgan ain't the kind of man you want to meet." He was gone before she could argue. Sarah turned to Jessie, who was shifting nervously from foot to foot. "Who's Silas Morgan?" Jessie's face darkened. "Owns the bank in town. Been trying to buy the Thornton ranch for years. Mr. Ezra always refused, but since he got sick." The boy trailed off, fear plain in his eyes. "Morgan's the kind of man who takes what he wants, ma'am, one way or another." Sarah moved to the window. 4 riders had stopped at the edge of the property. One of them, a man in an expensive suit that looked wrong against the dusty prairie, was speaking to Caleb. Even from here she could see the tension in Caleb's stance, the way his hand hovered near his gun. "I ain't askin' again, Thornton." Morgan's voice carried across the yard, smooth as snake oil. "Your father's in no condition to run this ranch. Everyone knows it. Sell to me now and I'll give you fair price. Keep fighting and you'll lose everything." "My father built this ranch with his bare hands," Caleb replied, his voice steady. "I ain't selling it to the man who destroyed half the farms in this valley." Morgan laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Destroyed, I saved those farmers from themselves. Gave them a way out when the drought would have killed them anyway. You gave them pennies on the dollar and watched them starve." "Business is business, son." Morgan leaned forward in his saddle. "But I'm a patient man. You'll come around. They always do." His eyes swept toward the house, and Sarah felt a chill run down her spine when his gaze found her in the window. Something flickered across his face. Recognition. Surprise. "I see you've got yourself a new housekeeper," Morgan said slowly. "Pretty thing. Looks familiar somehow." Caleb stepped sideways, blocking Morgan's view. Time for you to leave. I'm going. Morgan gathered his reins, but his smile remained fixed and cold. We'll talk again soon, Thornton. Real soon. The riders turned and headed back north. Caleb stood watching until they disappeared over the ridge, then walked back to the house with heavy steps. What did he want? Sarah asked as soon as he entered. Same thing he always wants. The ranch, the water rights, everything my father spent his life building. And you said no. I always say no. Caleb pulled off his hat and ran a hand through his hair. But Morgan's getting bolder. He's bought up half the valley already. We're one of the last holdouts. Sarah thought about the look Morgan had given her. That flicker of recognition. He said I looked familiar. Caleb's eyes sharpened. You know him. No, but... She hesitated. My husband was a doctor in Philadelphia. He treated people from all walks of life. Maybe Morgan knew him somehow. Morgan's from back east originally. Made his money in railroads before he came out here. Caleb's jaw tightened. Stay away from him, Sarah. If he comes around again, don't let him see you. Why? Because men like Morgan collect information, and anything he knows he uses. The warning settled into Sarah's bones like ice. She'd escaped one nightmare in Philadelphia, only to walk into another one here. But this time, she wasn't alone. This time, she had people worth fighting for. I ain't scared of him, she said. Maybe you should be. Maybe. Sarah squared her shoulders. But I ain't leaving either, so you'd best get used to having me around. Something almost like a smile touched Caleb's lips. Yes, ma'am. The tension broke when Ezra wandered into the kitchen, still in his nightshirt, looking confused and fragile. Eleanor, is breakfast ready? I thought I smelled coffee. Sarah moved toward him without hesitation. It's Sarah, Mr. Thornton. And yes, breakfast is almost ready. Why don't you sit down? Sarah. Ezra blinked, clarity returning to his eyes for a moment. Yes, Sarah. I remember now. You're the one who makes the good biscuits. That's right. Eleanor made good biscuits too. His voice softened with grief. Best I ever tasted. Tell me about her recipe, Sarah said, gently guiding him to his chair. I'd love to know her secrets. As Ezra began to talk, his confusion fading into happy memories, Sarah caught Caleb watching from the doorway. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were warm. Thank you, he mouthed silently. She nodded once and turned back to the stove. The morning passed in its usual rhythm, but something had shifted. Sarah could feel it in the way the hands looked at her now, with respect instead of curiosity. She'd been tested by Morgan's visit and hadn't flinched. That meant something out here. It was nearly noon when a wagon pulled into the yard. Sarah recognized the woman driving it, Martha Kelly, wife of old Tom, one of the senior hands. She'd been cool to Sarah since her arrival, always watching with suspicious eyes, never quite welcoming. Mrs. McAllister. Martha's voice was clipped as she climbed down from the wagon. I need to speak with you. Of course. Sarah wiped her hands and stepped onto the porch. What can I do for you? You can explain what you're doing here. The bluntness caught Sarah off guard. I beg your pardon? I've been watching you. Martha's eyes were sharp and cold. You come out of nowhere, no family, no references, nothing but a sad story and a pretty face. And suddenly, Caleb Thornton is picking wildflowers and smiling like a fool. I'm just the housekeeper. Don't. Martha stepped closer, her voice dropping. I've seen your kind before. Women who use their looks to trap men with money. Ezra built this ranch, and I won't let some Philadelphia widow steal it from under him. Sarah felt her temper rise hot and sharp. I haven't stolen anything. Not yet. Martha's lip curled. But mark my words, Mrs. McAllister. If you hurt that family, I'll make sure you regret it. Martha. Caleb's voice cut through the tension like a knife. Neither woman had heard him approach. That's enough. Caleb, I heard what you said. He stepped between them, and his voice was harder than Sarah had ever heard it. Sarah is part of this household now. If you can't respect that, you'd best keep your distance. Martha's face flushed red. My mother would tell you to mind your own business. Caleb's eyes flashed. Same as I'm telling you now. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Martha turned on her heel and climbed back into her wagon. You'll see, she called over her shoulder. When she shows her true colors, you'll see I was right. The wagon rattled away, leaving a cloud of dust and wounded pride. I'm sorry, Caleb said quietly. Don't be. Sarah's voice was steadier than she felt. She's just protecting the people she loves. That don't give her the right to... It's fine. Sarah forced a smile. I've been called worse. Caleb reached out his hand, brushing hers. The touch was brief, barely there, but it sent warmth spreading up her arm. You shouldn't have to take that from anyone. Not here. Not anymore. I know. And somehow, standing there with his hand near hers, she believed it. The afternoon brought new trouble. 3 riders appeared at the gate, rough men with hard eyes and harder faces. The one in front had a scar through his eyebrow and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Name's Wade, he said when Caleb went out to meet them. This here's Collins and Doyle. We're looking for work. Heard you might be hiring. Sarah watched from the kitchen window, her unease growing. Something about these men set her teeth on edge. The way they looked around, assessing everything. The way Wade's eyes kept drifting toward the house. We ain't hiring, Caleb said flatly. That's so. Wade's smile widened. Funny. I heard you lost 3 hands last month. And with Roundup coming. Where'd you hear that? Word travels. Wade shrugged. Look, we ain't troublemakers. Just men looking for honest work. Give us a week's trial. If we don't suit, we'll move on. Caleb hesitated. Sarah could see him calculating they did need hands and Roundup was coming. But she could also see his instincts warring with his practical needs. 1 week, he said finally. You follow my rules, do your work, and keep your heads down. First sign of trouble, you're gone. Fair enough. Wade touched his hat brim, his eyes sliding toward the window where Sarah stood. Mighty fine-looking place you got here, Thornton. Mighty fine indeed. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in her narrow bed, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling around her. Somewhere in the bunkhouse, the new men were settling in. Somewhere down the hall, Ezra was hopefully sleeping peacefully. And somewhere outside, Caleb was probably doing one last check of the property before turning in. The knock on her door came just past midnight. Sarah. Caleb's voice was low and urgent. You awake? She opened the door to find him pale and shaking. It's Pa. He's having one of his episodes. Worse than usual. I don't know what to do. Sarah grabbed her shawl and followed him down the hall. Ezra was sitting up in bed, eyes wild, clawing at invisible enemies. Get away, he screamed. Get away from her, Eleanor. Pa, it's me. Caleb tried to grab his father's hands. It's Caleb. You're safe. You're one of them. Ezra shoved him away with surprising strength. You're trying to take her. I won't let you take her. Sarah stepped forward without thinking. Mr. Thornton. Ezra. The old man's wild eyes found her. Eleanor. Yes. The lie came easily, gently. It's me, Ezra. I'm right here. No one's taking me anywhere. Ezra's breathing slowed. Eleanor. They were trying to... I couldn't. I know. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, taking his trembling hands in hers. But I'm safe. You kept me safe. You always do. I always will. Tears streamed down Ezra's weathered cheeks. I promised you. On our wedding day. I promised. And you've kept that promise. Sarah squeezed his hands. Now it's time to rest. I'll be right here when you wake up. Slowly, gradually, Ezra's agitation faded. His eyes grew heavy, and his grip on her hands loosened. Within minutes, he was asleep, his breathing deep and even. Sarah stayed where she was, holding his hands, her heart breaking for this confused old man who loved his wife so fiercely that even his failing mind couldn't let her go. "How did you do that?" Caleb's voice was rough with emotion. "I just told him what he needed to hear." "You lied to him." "I gave him peace." Sarah looked up at Caleb, and she saw tears glistening in his eyes. "Sometimes that's more important than truth." Caleb sank into the chair beside the bed, his head dropping into his hands. "I don't know how much longer I can do this, watching him slip away piece by piece. Some days he doesn't know me at all. Some days he thinks I'm the enemy." "You're not alone anymore." Sarah reached out and touched his shoulder. "Whatever happens, you don't have to face it alone." He looked up at her, and something raw and vulnerable showed in his face. "Why do you care? You barely know us." "Because you gave me a chance when no one else would." Her voice was steady. "Because your father calls me by his wife's name and smiles like he hasn't smiled in years. Because Jesse looks at me like I'm his mother. Because—" She hesitated. "Because this feels like home. And I haven't had a home in a very long time." Caleb reached up and covered her hand with his. His touch was warm, roughened by work, and impossibly gentle. "Sarah." "Yes. I'm glad you're here." "So am I." They stayed like that until dawn, keeping watch over Ezra together. When the first light touched the horizon, Caleb finally stood, his hand slipping reluctantly from hers. "I should check on the hands. Those new men, you don't trust them." "Not as far as I can throw them." His jaw tightened. "Keep an eye out today. Anything seems wrong, you come find me." "I will." He paused at the door, looking back at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Thank you, Sarah. For everything." Then he was gone, and Sarah was left with the sleeping old man and the first warm rays of summer sun streaming through the window. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if Morgan would make good on his threats, if the new hands could be trusted, if Martha would ever accept her. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She wasn't running anymore. This was her home now. These people were her family. And she would fight for them with everything she had, even if it cost her everything she had left. The summer heat grew fiercer as the days passed, and so did Sarah's certainty that something was wrong. She caught Wade watching her through the kitchen window more than once, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. She noticed how Collins lingered near the barn when Caleb was away. And Doyle, silent Doyle, seemed to appear and disappear like a ghost, always listening, never speaking. "You're imagining things," Jessie said when she mentioned her concerns. "They're just new. Takes time to settle in." "Maybe." But Sarah's instincts screamed otherwise. It was a Thursday afternoon when everything changed. Sarah was hanging laundry behind the house when she heard voices from the other side of the barn. Wade's voice low and urgent, and another voice she recognized instantly. Silas Morgan. She pressed herself against the barn wall, barely breathing. "Thornton's getting suspicious," Wade was saying. "That woman's got him wrapped around her finger. He don't leave the property much anymore." "Then we accelerate the plan." Morgan's voice was smooth cold. "The old man's papers, have you found them?" "Not yet. He keeps them locked up somewhere." "Find them. The water rights deed is all I need. Without that document, the Thorntons have no legal claim to the creek access, and without water, they're finished." "Exactly." Morgan paused. "What about the woman Sarah McAllister?" Sarah's blood turned to ice. "What about her?" "I knew her husband. Thomas McAllister was the doctor who treated my mother before she died. Did everything he could to save her." Morgan's voice hardened. "But that was years ago. Now she's just another obstacle. If she becomes a problem, remove her." "Remove her how?" "Use your imagination, but make it look like an accident. I won't have murder charges complicating my business." Sarah's hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped the shirt she was holding. She had to get to Caleb, Had to warn him. Had to, well. She spun around. Wade stood behind her, his scarred face twisted into an ugly smile. "Didn't anyone teach you it ain't polite to eavesdrop, ma'am?" You was just nothing." Wade grabbed her arm, his grip bruising. "Now I reckon we need to have a little talk about what you think you heard." "Let go of me." "Or what?" Wade laughed. "You gonna scream? Go ahead. Nobody's close enough to hear." "She don't have to scream." Jesse's voice came from behind Wade, followed by the distinctive click of a rifle being cocked. "Let her go, now!" Wade's grip loosened slightly. "Easy, boy. This ain't your fight. Mrs. McAllister is family. That makes it my fight." Jesse's voice didn't waver. "Step away from her or I put a hole in your back." For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then Wade released Sarah's arm and raised his hand slowly. "You're making a mistake, kid." "Reckon I'll take my chances." Jesse jerked his head toward the house. "Go, Mrs. McAllister. Find Mr. Thornton. Tell him everything." Sarah ran. She found Caleb in the south pasture checking fence lines. When he saw her face, he was off his horse before she could speak. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "Wade?" She was gasping, her words tumbling over each other. "He's working for Morgan. They're after documents, water rights. Morgan wants to—" "Slow down." Caleb gripped her shoulders. "Start from the beginning." She told him everything. The overheard conversation, Morgan's plan to steal the deed, Wade's threat, Jesse's intervention. Caleb's face grew harder with every word. "Where's Jesse now?" "Still at the barn. He had Wade at gunpoint." Caleb was already moving, pulling his rifle from its saddle holster. "Get to the house. Find Pa and stay with him. Lock the doors." "Caleb, go." His voice left no room for argument. Sarah ran for the house, her heart pounding. She found Ezra in the parlor staring at a photograph of Eleanor with tears streaming down his face. "Mr. Thornton." "Ezra, we need to go to your room. Now." "Eleanor." He looked up confused. "Is something wrong?" "Yes. We need to hide. Can you walk with me?" "Of course." He struggled to his feet. "I'll protect you, Eleanor. I always protect you." Sarah half carried him down the hall, her mind racing. Where would the documents be? If Morgan was after water rights, Ezra must have the deed somewhere safe. Somewhere. The cedar chest, Ezra said suddenly, his voice clearer than she'd heard it in days. "In my room. That's where I keep the important papers. Eleanor always said I should put them in a bank, but I don't trust bankers. Can you show me—" He led her to his bedroom, to a large cedar chest at the foot of the bed. His hands trembled as he lifted the lid, but his movements were sure. "Here." He pulled out a leather folder yellowed with age. "Everything's here. The land deed, the water rights, the agreement my father signed with the territorial government in '58. Sarah took the folder just as gunshots echoed from the yard. "Stay here." She pushed Ezra toward the bed. "Don't open the door for anyone but me or Caleb." "Sarah." Ezra grabbed her hand, and for a moment his eyes were completely lucid. "You're not Eleanor. I know that. I've known for a while, but you take care of us like she would have. That's enough." Her throat tightened. "I'll be back. I promise." She ran toward the kitchen where she could see through the window. Wade and Collins were facing off against Caleb and Jesse in the yard. Old Tom Kelly had joined them, his shotgun trained on the conspirators. "You're done, Wade," Caleb was saying. "Morgan's plan is finished. We know everything." "You don't know nothing." Wade's hand hovered near his pistol. "And even if you did, it don't matter. Morgan owns half the county. You think anyone's gonna believe your word against his? They'll believe the truth." "The truth." Wade laughed bitterly. "The truth is, your daddy's losing his mind, your ranch is hanging by a thread, and the only thing keeping you afloat is a widow from Philadelphia who probably ain't even what she claims to be." Caleb's jaw tightened. Sarah's got nothing to do with this. That's so. Wade's smile turned cruel. You even know why she really came out here, what she's running from. I know enough. Do you know her husband's family accused her of killing him, slow poisoning, they said. That's why they threw her out. That's why she ran. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She'd thought she'd left those accusations behind in Philadelphia. She'd thought, that's a lie. Caleb's voice didn't waver. Sarah didn't kill anyone. You sure about that? Wade was enjoying this now. Ask her about the medicine. Ask her what she gave him in those last days. Ask her why the family wanted her arrested. I said it's a lie. Then let her tell you herself. Wade's eyes found Sarah in the window. Go on, Mrs. McAllister. Tell him the truth. Tell him what you did. Every eye turned to the house. Sarah's hands were shaking the leather folder clutched to her chest. She could run. She could hide. She could let them think Wade was right. Or she could face this. Finally. She stepped out onto the porch. My husband was dying, she said, her voice stronger than she felt. Typhoid fever. The doctors gave him a week, maybe 2. He was in agony. Couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. Begged me to let him go. The yard was silent. Even Wade had stopped smirking. So I gave him laudanum. More than the doctor prescribed. Enough to let him sleep through the worst of it. Her voice cracked. He died in his sleep 3 days later. Peaceful. Without pain. You killed him, Wade said. I gave him mercy. Tears streamed down her face. His family wanted him to suffer because they thought God demanded it. I couldn't watch him suffer anymore. So yes, I gave him the medicine. And I would do it again. Caleb was staring at her, his expression unreadable. This was it. The moment he realized who she really was. The moment he threw her out like everyone else had. That's not murder, he said quietly. Sarah's heart stopped. That's love. Caleb turned back to Wade, and now his voice was ice. Get off my property, both of you. And tell Morgan if he comes near this ranch again, I'll kill him myself. You're making a mistake, Thornton. Maybe. But it's my mistake to make. Caleb raised his rifle. You've got 30 seconds. Wade and Collins exchanged glances. Then slowly they backed toward their horses. This ain't over, Wade called as he mounted. Morgan always gets what he wants. Always. Not this time. Caleb didn't lower his rifle until they'd disappeared over the ridge. Then he turned to Sarah. She was still standing on the porch, trembling, waiting for the judgment that always came. Instead, Caleb walked toward her, his face soft. You should have told me. Would you have believed me? Yes. He stopped in front of her, close enough to touch. I would have believed you. Why? Because I know you, Sarah McAllister. I've watched you gentle my father when he's lost in his own mind. I've seen you teach Jesse to read. I've watched you turn this broken house into a home. His hand came up to cup her face. That ain't the work of a killer. That's the work of someone with more love than she knows what to do with. Sarah broke. The tears she'd held back for months finally spilled over, and she sobbed against his chest while his arms wrapped around her. I'm sorry, she gasped. I should have told you, I should have... Hush now. His hand stroked her hair. It's done. It's all done. Morgan won't stop. I know. He'll come back. I know that too. Caleb pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. But when he does, we'll face him together. You hear me? Together. Together. The word felt strange in her mouth. Foreign. Beautiful. Now. Caleb's voice gentled further. What's in that folder you're holding? Sarah had almost forgotten. She held up the leather case. Your father showed me. The water rights deed. Everything Morgan needs to take your land. Caleb took the folder, his eyes widening as he examined the contents. These papers, these, Pa's had these locked away for years. I've been trying to find them. He knew. Even with his memory failing, he knew where they were. Sarah wiped her eyes. He's still in there, Caleb, still protecting his family the only way he can. Something shifted in Caleb's expression. Something raw and grateful and full of hope. Pa, he breathed. Then louder. Jesse, stay with Sarah. I need to see my father. He was gone before Sarah could respond, disappearing into the house with the folder clutched to his chest. Jesse appeared at her side, his rifle still in hand. You okay, ma'am? I think so. Sarah took a shaky breath. You saved my life back there. Your family. Jesse shrugged like it was the simplest thing in the world. That's what family does. Family. The word wrapped around her heart and squeezed. Jesse, what Wade said about my husband. I don't care. The boy's voice was fierce. You're a good person, Mrs. McAllister. I knew that the first day you came here. Nothing some low-down snake like Wade says can change that. Sarah wanted to hug him. Instead, she just smiled through her tears. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Jesse's expression grew serious. Wade was right about one thing. Morgan won't give up. He'll be back. And next time he'll bring more than 2 hired guns. I know. We need to be ready. We will be. Sarah straightened her shoulders. But first, I need to make supper. Those men will be hungry. Jesse laughed, surprise and relief mingling in his voice. Only you could think about food at a time like this. Food is how I fight. Sarah headed for the kitchen. Morgan wants to starve us out. I'll show him what a well-fed family can do. The evening meal that night was different. The hands gathered around the table with a new energy, a new determination. Word had spread quickly about Wade's betrayal and Morgan's plot. Every man there knew what they were fighting for now. Old Tom Kelly raised his glass. To the Thorntons. And to Mrs. McAllister, for reminding us what's worth fighting for. Hear, hear, the men echoed. Caleb caught Sarah's eye across the table. The look he gave her said more than words ever could. After supper, when the dishes were done and the house had settled into quiet, Sarah found Caleb on the porch, staring out at the darkening sky. Your father, she asked. Sleeping. Peaceful for once. Caleb didn't look at her. He knew Sarah. Even with everything he's lost, he knew those papers mattered. He was protecting them. Protecting us. He loves you. I know. Caleb's voice cracked. I wish I could tell him. Tell him how much. He knows. Sarah moved closer. A father always knows. They stood in silence for a long moment. Then Caleb turned to face her. What you did for your husband, that took courage. It took desperation. No. He shook his head. It took love. The kind of love most people only dream about. The kind that puts someone else's peace above your own. His family didn't see it that way. His family was wrong. Caleb's hand found hers. Just like Martha was wrong. Just like Wade was wrong. Sarah, you're not what anyone says you are. You're not worthless. You're not a killer. You're not a burden. Then what am I? He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. You're the woman I've been waiting for my whole life. He stepped closer. I know it's too soon. I know we barely know each other. But I look at you, and I see everything I never knew I needed. Sarah's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst. Caleb, you don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know. He squeezed her hand. Whatever happens next, I needed you to know. She looked at him, this quiet, steady man who'd given her a chance when no one else would, who'd believed her when everyone else condemned her, who looked at her like she was worth something. I know, she whispered. I've known for a while. He kissed her then, soft, gentle, like he was afraid she might break. She kissed him back, like she'd never break again. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless Caleb rested his forehead against hers. "Whatever comes next," he said, "we face it together. Together." The word felt like a promise, felt like home. Somewhere in the house, Ezra called out in his sleep, Eleanor's name soft and sad. And Sarah felt something settle inside her, not just love for Caleb, but love for this whole broken, beautiful family. She wasn't running anymore. She was staying. And God help anyone who tried to take that away from her. 3 days passed like a held breath. Sarah cooked. Caleb patrolled. The hands took shifts watching the property line. Everyone knew Morgan would come. The only question was when. It was Jesse who spotted the riders first. 20 men, he gasped, bursting into the kitchen. Maybe more. Coming from the north and the east. They're surrounding us. Sarah's hand stilled over the bread dough. Where's Caleb? South pasture. I sent Pete to fetch him, but he won't make it back in time. How long do we have? 10 minutes, maybe less. Sarah wiped her hands and grabbed the rifle from behind the door. Get the hands, everyone who can shoot. Tell them to take positions around the house. Mrs. McAllister, you can't. Go, Jesse, now. The boy ran. Sarah checked the rifle's load, then hurried to Ezra's room. The old man was sitting in his chair staring at Eleanor's photograph. Ezra, we need to move. There's trouble coming. I know. His voice was steady, clearer than she'd heard it in weeks. I heard the boy. Morgan's finally making his move. Can you walk? I can do more than walk. Ezra rose to his feet, and for a moment Sarah saw the man he must have been 20 years ago. Strong, fierce, unbreakable. Get me to the cellar. There's something there Morgan doesn't know about. What? My father's old rifles, a dozen of them, and enough ammunition to hold off an army. Sarah helped him down the stairs, her heart pounding. Through the windows, she could see riders closing in, their figures dark against the summer sky. Eleanor! Ezra grabbed her arm. I mean, Sarah, I need to tell you something. Later. We need to... No, now. His grip was surprisingly strong. When Morgan's men come through that door, you run. You hear me? You take Jesse, and you run. I'm not leaving you. You're young. You've got years ahead of you. I've lived my life. His eyes were wet. Eleanor would want me to protect you. Let me do that. Let me be the man she married one last time. Ezra, promise me. Sarah looked at this broken, beautiful man who'd called her by his dead wife's name, who'd accepted her into his home when she had nothing, who'd shown her that family wasn't about blood, but about choice. No, she said firmly. I'm not running, and neither are you. We fight together or we die together. That's what family does. Ezra stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly he smiled. Eleanor would have liked you, he whispered. She would have liked you very much. Gunshots cracked outside. Sarah grabbed Ezra's arm and pulled him toward the cellar stairs. The rifles. Show me where. The cellar was dark and musty, but Ezra moved through it with surprising confidence. He pushed aside a false wall to reveal a hidden alcove. Inside, just as he'd promised, were a dozen rifles and boxes of ammunition. My father hid these during the Indian Wars, Ezra said. Never thought we'd need them again. Sarah grabbed 2 rifles and handed one to Ezra. Can you still shoot? I could shoot the wings off a fly at 50 yards. Ezra's hands were steady as he loaded the weapon. Some things you don't forget. They climbed back upstairs to find chaos. Morgan's men had reached the yard. Old Tom and 3 other hands were returning fire from the barn. Jesse was crouched behind the water trough, his young face set with determination. Where's Caleb? Sarah shouted. Still coming. Pete says he's 5 minutes out. 5 minutes might as well be 5 hours. Morgan's men were advancing, using the outbuildings for cover. Sarah could see Wade among them, his scarred face twisted with rage. And there, sitting on horseback at the edge of the property, Silas Morgan himself, watching like a king surveying his conquest. "Cover me," Sarah told Ezra, and before he could protest, she ran for the porch. A bullet whizzed past her ear. Another splintered the railing inches from her hand. She dropped behind the water barrel and started shooting back. "Mrs. McAllister!" Jesse's voice was desperate. "Get back inside. Shut up and keep shooting." She aimed for Wade, but he ducked behind the barn. Another of Morgan's men wasn't so lucky her shot took him in the shoulder, and he went down screaming. "Not bad," Ezra called from the window. "But you're aiming too high. Drop your sights a few inches." "Now you're giving me shooting lessons?" "I'm trying to keep you alive, girl. Listen to your elders." Despite everything, Sarah almost laughed. The battle raged on. One of the hands went down clutching his leg. Another took a graze to the arm but kept fighting. Morgan's men were being driven back, but there were too many of them. For every one that fell, two more seemed to take his place. Then Sarah heard the thunder of hoofbeats from the south. Caleb burst over the ridge rifle, already firing with half a dozen neighboring ranchers behind him. "Thornton's got reinforcements," someone shouted. The tide turned. Caught between two forces, Morgan's hired guns began to scatter. Wade tried to rally them, but a shot from Caleb sent him diving for cover. "Morgan!" Caleb's voice rang across the yard. "Call off your men." Morgan sat motionless on his horse, watching his plan crumble. His face was blank, but his eyes burned with fury. "You think this changes anything?" he called back. "I own this valley, Thornton. I own the bank. I own the sheriff. I own everyone who matters. You don't own us. Yet." Morgan smiled coldly. "Enjoy your victory. It won't last." He turned his horse to leave, and that's when the second wave appeared. They came from the east, where no one had been watching. A dozen more men, fresh and well-armed. At their head rode Wade, somehow circled around during the confusion. "Thought you had us beat, didn't you?" Wade shouted. "Morgan always has a backup plan." The reinforcements swept toward the house. Caleb and his allies were too far away to intercept. The hands were exhausted, low on ammunition. Jesse was clutching an empty rifle, terror in his eyes. Sarah made her choice. She stepped off the porch and walked into the open yard. "What are you doing?" Ezra screamed. "Sarah!" She ignored him. Her rifle was empty, but she held it steady, pointed at Wade as he rode toward her. "Stop," she commanded. Wade laughed. "Or, what you gonna shoot me with an empty gun?" Maybe I'm bluffing. You willing to take that chance?" He hesitated, just for a second. It was enough. A shot rang out, not from Sarah, but from somewhere behind Morgan's lines. Wade's horse screamed and reared. Wade tumbled to the ground, his gun flying from his hand. "Who the hell?" A rider emerged from the chaos. A young woman with dark hair and Morgan's own cold eyes. "Ruth," Morgan's voice cracked with shock. "What are you doing? What someone should have done years ago." Ruth Morgan swung down from her horse pistol, still smoking. "This is over, Father. All of it. You dare." "I dare." Ruth's voice was fierce, unshaking. "I've watched you destroy good people for 20 years. Watched you buy and bully and break anyone who stood in your way. I won't watch anymore. You're my daughter. I'm my mother's daughter." Ruth's eyes glistened with tears. "And she would have been ashamed of what you've become." The yard fell silent. Morgan's remaining men looked at each other, uncertain. Their leader had been defied by his own blood. The righteous anger that had driven them suddenly seemed hollow. "It's over, Morgan." Caleb rode up, his rifle trained on the banker. "Your own daughters turned against you. Your men are beaten. Walk away now and we'll let you keep your life." Morgan's face contorted with rage. For a terrible moment, Sarah thought he might charge anyway. Consequences be damned. Then his shoulders slumped. "You haven't won," he said quietly. "I still own the bank. I still hold mortgages on half the ranches in this valley. This isn't over. Maybe not. Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady. But we know what you are now. Everyone knows. And we'll be ready. Morgan looked at her, really looked, and something shifted in his expression. Recognition. Memory. Your husband saved my mother's life, he said softly. Gave her another year she wouldn't have had otherwise. I never forgot that. Then why come after us? Because I couldn't stop. Because once you start taking, you can't remember how to stop. Morgan's voice cracked. That's my curse. And now it's destroyed the only thing I had left. He looked at Ruth, something broken and desperate in his eyes. She met his gaze without flinching. Goodbye, Father, she said. Morgan rode away alone. His hired men scattered in every direction, leaderless and defeated. Wade tried to crawl toward his horse, but Jesse planted a boot on his back. You ain't going nowhere, the boy said. Sheriff's gonna want to talk to you. Sarah's legs gave out. She would have fallen, but Caleb was there, catching her, holding her close. You walked into a firing squad. He said, his voice rough with emotion. What were you thinking? That I wasn't going to lose anyone else? She pressed her face against his chest. Not you. Not Ezra. Not any of them. You could have died. But I didn't. She looked up at him. We didn't. Caleb kissed her. Hard. Desperate. In front of everyone. The hands whooped and cheered. Jesse made gagging noises. Old Tom muttered something about young love and walked away shaking his head. Mr. Thornton. Ruth Morgan approached, looking uncertain. I know I have no right to ask, but I've got nowhere else to go. Caleb looked at her, this young woman, who'd defied her own father to do what was right. You've got plenty of places to go, he said. Starting with our supper table. Sarah, think you can feed one more? Sarah smiled. I think I can manage. Ruth's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. I can't. You don't have to say anything. Sarah took her hand. You did what needed doing. That's enough. The rest of the day passed in a blur. The wounded were tended. The dead, two of Morgan's men who'd refused to surrender, were buried outside the property line. The sheriff arrived from town looking embarrassed and apologetic and took Wade and Collins into custody. Morgan paid me to look the other way, he admitted to Caleb. I ain't proud of it, but it's done now. Whatever you need, you've got it. Just do your job, Caleb replied. That's all anyone's asking. As the sun began to set, Sarah found herself alone in the kitchen. Her hands shook as she tried to prepare supper. The adrenaline was fading, leaving exhaustion and delayed terror in its wake. You're trembling. Martha Kelly stood in the doorway. The woman who'd accused Sarah of being a fortune hunter, who'd warned Caleb to send her away. I'm fine, Sarah said automatically. No, you're not. Martha crossed the kitchen and took the knife from Sarah's hands. Sit down before you hurt yourself. I need to. I'll finish supper. Martha's voice was gruff, but not unkind. You rest. Sarah sank into a chair, too tired to argue. Why are you helping me? Martha was quiet for a moment. I saw what you did today. Walked into those guns like you had nothing to lose. But you weren't protecting yourself. You were protecting them. She paused. I was wrong about you. And I'm sorry. 3 words. Simple. Direct. But they meant more to Sarah than all the apologies in the world. Thank you, she whispered. Martha nodded and returned to the stove. That night after supper, after the hands had turned in and the house had grown quiet, Caleb found Sarah on the porch. She was sitting in Ezra's rocking chair, wrapped in a shawl, staring at the stars. Pa's sleeping? Caleb said, settling into the chair beside her. Best night he's had in months. Kept talking about the fight, about you. Me. Called you the bravest woman he'd ever seen, besides Ma, of course. Caleb's voice softened. I told him I agreed. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. I was terrified. That's what makes it brave. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the crickets sing. Finally, Caleb spoke again. I've been thinking. About what? About what comes next. He turned to face her. Morgan's beaten, but he's not finished. There'll be legal battles, bank troubles, probably more hired guns eventually. I know. It's going to be hard, maybe harder than anything we've faced so far. I know that too. Caleb reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. In the starlight, Sarah saw the glint of gold. This was my mother's. He held up a simple ring worn smooth with age. Pa gave it to her the day they got married. She wore it every day until she died. Sarah's breath caught. I ain't good with words, Caleb continued. Never have been, but I know what I feel. And I know I don't want to face what's coming without you. Caleb. Sarah McAllister. I love you. I love your strength and your stubbornness, and the way you hum when you're making biscuits. I love that you calmed my father when I couldn't. I love that you taught Jesse to read. I love that you walked into gunfire for people you barely knew. He slid off his chair and knelt in front of her. Will you marry me? Sarah looked at him, this quiet, steady man, who'd seen her at her worst and loved her anyway. Who'd believed her when no one else would. Who looked at her like she was worth something. Yes, she breathed. Yes, Caleb Thornton. Yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. Then he kissed her soft and sweet and full of promise, and Sarah felt something inside her finally let go. She wasn't worthless. She wasn't barren. She wasn't a burden. She was loved. And that was more than enough. Somewhere behind them, the kitchen door creaked. They pulled apart to find Ezra standing in the doorway, tears streaming down his face. Eleanor, he whispered. Then he blinked and clarity returned. No, Sarah. You're Sarah. Yes. And you said yes. Sarah smiled through her tears. I said yes. Ezra crossed the porch and pulled her into a fierce embrace. Welcome to the family, he said. Finally, properly. Welcome to the family. Over his shoulder, Sarah saw Jesse peering through the window, grinning like a fool. Ruth stood beside him, her expression soft with something like hope. Old Tom and Martha were there too, and Samuel and all the others who'd fought beside them. Her family, all of them. Not the family she'd been born into, not the family she'd married into, but the family she'd chosen. The family that had chosen her, and that Sarah realized was the greatest gift of all. So, Ezra said, pulling back. When's the wedding? The morning of the wedding arrived with summer heat already pressing down on the valley. Sarah stood before the mirror in Margaret Thornton's room, her room now adjusting the cream-colored dress she'd sewn with her own hands. Her fingers trembled slightly as she pinned the silver needle to her collar, the one Thomas's mother had given her all those months ago. You look beautiful. Ruth Morgan stood in the doorway, holding a small bundle wrapped in cloth. In the weeks since the battle, she'd become something like a sister to Sarah. They'd bonded over shared losses and uncertain futures, two women who'd found family in the most unexpected places. I'm nervous, Sarah admitted. Isn't that foolish? I've done this before? It's different this time. Ruth crossed the room and pressed the bundle into Sarah's hands. This was my mother's. She kept it hidden from my father for years. I want you to have it. Sarah unwrapped the cloth to find a delicate hair comb adorned with tiny seed pearls. Her breath caught. Ruth, I can't. You can. And you will. Ruth's eyes glistened. You gave me a home when I had nothing. This is the least I can do. Before Sarah could respond, a knock came at the door. Jesse's voice excited and breathless. Mrs. McAllister, I mean, Miss Sarah, Mr. Ezra's asking for you." Sarah found Ezra in the parlor dressed in his finest suit, the one he'd worn to his own wedding 50 years ago. His hands shook as he adjusted his collar, but his eyes were clear, clearer than they'd been in months. "Sarah." He turned to face her and his breath caught. "Oh, my dear, you look just like—" He stopped himself, swallowed hard. "You look just like yourself," he finished softly. "And that's more beautiful than anything." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Ezra, I know what I've been doing," his voice cracked. "Calling you Eleanor, pretending she was still here. Some days I can't help it. But today I know exactly who you are." "And who am I?" "You're the woman who saved my son." Ezra took her hands in his. "You're the woman who held my hand through the dark nights and pretended to be my Eleanor when I couldn't bear the truth. You're the woman who walked into gunfire for a family that wasn't even hers yet." He squeezed her fingers. "You're my daughter, Sarah, in every way that matters, and I couldn't be prouder to give you away today." Sarah couldn't speak. She pulled the old man into her arms and held him while they both wept tears of grief and joy and healing all mingled together. "Now then," Ezra pulled back, wiping his eyes with a handkerchief. "Enough of this crying. We've got a wedding to attend." The ceremony was simple but perfect. Half the county had gathered in the yard, drawn by news of the battle and curiosity about the woman who'd faced down Morgan's army. Sarah walked toward Caleb on Ezra's arm, her heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe. Caleb stood at the makeshift altar, Jesse beside him as best man. When he saw Sarah approaching, his entire face transformed. The guarded, careful man she'd met in Harrison's general store was gone. In his place stood someone open and vulnerable, and so full of love it hurt to look at him. "Who gives this woman to be married?" the minister asked. "I do." Ezra's voice rang out strong and clear. "With all my heart." He placed Sarah's hand in Caleb's, and she felt the tremor in his fingers as he let go. But when she looked back, he was smiling, the first real smile she'd seen from him in all the time she'd known him. "Dearly beloved," the minister began. The vows were traditional, but when it came time for the rings, Caleb surprised her. Instead of a simple band, he pulled out 2 rings, one plain gold, and one with a small diamond that caught the light. "This belonged to my grandmother," he said quietly. "Ma gave it to me before she died, told me to save it for someone special." His voice broke. "I reckon you're about as special as they come." Sarah's tears spilled over as he slipped both rings onto her finger. The weight felt right, like she'd been waiting her whole life to wear them. "I now pronounce you man and wife." The minister smiled. "You may kiss your bride." Caleb didn't need to be told twice. He pulled Sarah into his arms and kissed her with everything he had, all the fear and hope and desperate love he'd been holding back. The crowd cheered. Jesse whooped loud enough to startle the horses. Even Martha Kelly was wiping her eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," the minister announced, "I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Caleb Thornton." The celebration that followed was the finest the valley had seen in years. Tables groaned under the weight of food, Sarah's cooking supplemented by dishes from every ranch wife within 20 miles. Fiddle music filled the air, and couples young and old took turns on the makeshift dance floor. Sarah was dancing with Caleb when she noticed a rider approaching from the north. Her body tensed automatically, but Caleb's hand on her back steadied her. "It's all right," he murmured. "I see him." The rider was a young man in a formal suit, a lawyer by the look of him. He dismounted and approached with obvious nervousness. "Mr. Thornton." "Mrs. Thornton." He pulled an envelope from his coat. "I've been sent by Mr. Silas Morgan." The music stopped. Every eye turned toward the newcomer. Jesse's hand dropped to his pistol. "Easy," Caleb said. "Let's hear what he has to say." The lawyer swallowed hard. Mr. Morgan has decided to make amends. He's transferring ownership of the Copper Creek Bank to a trust managed by the Valley's ranchers. All outstanding mortgages are being forgiven, and he hesitated. And he's deeding his ranch to his daughter Ruth effective immediately. Stunned silence. What's the catch? Caleb demanded. No catch, sir. Mr. Morgan he's dying. The lawyer's voice dropped. Cancer. The doctors give him 6 months, maybe less. He said. The young man consulted his notes. He said he couldn't undo what he'd done, but he could stop anyone else from doing it in his name. Sarah looked at Ruth, who stood frozen, her face white with shock. He's giving me the ranch, Ruth whispered. Everything, miss. The house, the land, the cattle. All of it. Ruth's legs gave out. Jessie caught her before she hit the ground, lowering her gently into a chair. I need to see him, Ruth said. I need to. He asked that you don't. The lawyer's voice was gentle. He said he didn't want your last memory of him to be a sick old man in a bed. He wanted you to remember him as he was, before he became a monster, before he forgot how to be a father. Ruth broke down, then sobbing into her hands. Sarah went to her, wrapping her arms around the younger woman. He destroyed so many lives, Ruth gasped. How can I forgive him? How can I ever? You don't have to forgive him, Sarah said quietly. Not today, maybe not ever. But you can grieve him. You can mourn the father he might have been. And you can choose to be different. What if I can't? What if I'm too much like him? You stood up against him when it mattered. Sarah pulled back to look into Ruth's eyes. You chose us over your own blood. That tells me exactly what kind of person you are. Ruth stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. I want to stay, she said. Here. With you. With all of you. I want to be part of this family. Sarah smiled. You already are. The celebration resumed, but with a different energy now. The news of Morgan's illness and his final gift spread quickly. Some called it justice. Others called it cowardice. But most agreed it was something else entirely, the last act of a man trying to find redemption before it was too late. As the sun began to set, Sarah slipped away from the crowd. She needed a moment alone to process everything. The wedding, Morgan's news, the overwhelming tide of emotions that threatened to sweep her away. She found herself at the small hill behind the house, where 3 wooden crosses marked the graves of Caleb's mother and brothers. She knelt in the grass, her wedding dress spreading around her like a cloud. I wish I could have known you, she whispered to Eleanor's marker. Wish I could have thanked you for raising him, for making him the man he is. The wind rustled through the grass, carrying the faint scent of prairie roses. I'll take care of them, Sarah continued. Your husband, your son. This land you loved so much, I'll protect it all. I promise. She knows. Sarah turned. Ezra stood behind her, his old face soft with memory. I used to come up here every day after she died, he said, lowering himself to sit beside her. Tell her about my day. Ask her advice. Some folks thought I was crazy. What did you tell them? Told them to mind their own business. Ezra almost smiled. Eleanor always said I was too stubborn for my own good. Reckon she was right. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and rose. I'm going to miss her, Ezra said quietly. Every day for the rest of my life. But he turned to look at Sarah. Having you here makes the missing easier. You've given me something to live for again, something besides memories. Ezra, I know I call you Eleanor sometimes. No, I get confused, but you need to understand something. He took her hand in his weathered one. Even when I forget, even when the fog comes down and I can't remember my own name, I know I'm safe. I know someone loves me. That's because of you. Sarah's tears fell freely now. I love you too. You know that, right? I know. Ezra squeezed her hand. Now come on. Your husband's going to think you've run off. They walked back to the celebration together, arm in arm. Caleb was waiting at the edge of the yard, concern creasing his brow. Everything all right? Everything's perfect. Sarah rose on her toes to kiss his cheek. I was just making some promises. To who? To your mother. And to myself. The dancing lasted long into the night. Sarah danced with Caleb until her feet ached, then danced some more. She danced with Jessie, who blushed crimson and stepped on her toes 3 times. She danced with old Tom, who moved with surprising grace for a man his age. She even danced with Martha Kelly, who whispered, "I'm glad I was wrong about you," before spinning away. Finally, as the stars wheeled overhead and the lanterns burned low, Caleb pulled her aside. I have something for you. Caleb, you've already given me everything. Not everything. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch. Open it. Inside was a seed, small and brown and unremarkable. Sarah looked up, confused. It's a rose seed, Caleb explained. Prairie rose. Ma used to grow them all along the front of the house. They died after she did. I couldn't bear to tend them. He closed her fingers around the seed. But I saved one, just in case someone came along who could bring them back. The meaning hit Sarah like a physical force. He wasn't just giving her a seed. He was giving her permission to put down roots, to grow something new, to make this place her own. I'll plant it tomorrow, she whispered. First thing. Together. Together. The last of the guests departed sometime after midnight. Jessie helped Ruth to the guest room. She'd had more to drink than was perhaps wise, but no one blamed her. Old Tom and Martha drove off in their wagon, waving until they disappeared into the darkness. The hands turned into the bunkhouse, exhausted but happy. Finally, Sarah and Caleb stood alone in the kitchen. Their kitchen. Their home. Well, Mrs. Thornton. Caleb pulled her into his arms. How does it feel to be a married woman? Like coming home. Sarah rested her head against his chest. Like I've been walking for a very long time, and I finally found a place to stop. No more running. No more running. She looked up at him. This is where I belong. With you. With Ezra and Jessie and Ruth and everyone else. This is my family now. Always was, Caleb said. You just didn't know it yet. He kissed her then, slow and sweet, and Sarah felt the last of her old life fall away. The merchant's wife from Philadelphia. The widow who'd traded her ring for bread. The woman who'd been called worthless, barren a burden. She wasn't that woman anymore. She was Sarah Thornton. Wife, daughter, mother to a growing family. Builder of a new life from the ashes of the old. And she had never been more herself. The next morning, Sarah woke before dawn. Old habits died hard, and there was breakfast to make. But as she slipped out of bed, Caleb caught her hand. Stay, he murmured, just for a minute. She stayed, for more than a minute. When she finally made it to the kitchen, she found Ezra already there, carefully measuring coffee into the pot. He looked up at her approach, and his eyes were clear as mountain water. Good morning, Sarah. Not Eleanor, Sarah. Good morning, Ezra. You're up early. Couldn't sleep. He finished with the coffee and turned to face her. Had too much to think about. Good thoughts. The best. He pulled something from his pocket, a small leather folder worn with age. This is for you. Should have given it to you sooner, but I wanted to wait for the right moment. Sarah opened the folder. Inside was a document yellow with age, but still legible. Her eyes scanned the words, and her breath caught. Ezra, this is the deed to the ranch. I know. You've added my name. I know that too. The old man's eyes twinkled. You're family now. Legally, officially, in every way that counts. That means this land is yours as much as it's mine or Caleb's. But, no buts. Ezra took her hands. I may not have much time left. The fog's getting worse. Some days soon I won't remember any of this. But I need to know that when I'm gone, this place is in good hands." Sarah couldn't speak. She pulled him into a fierce embrace, holding him tight. "You've got plenty of time left," she whispered. "Maybe, maybe not." Ezra patted her back. "But either way, I'm ready, because of you." The months that followed were the happiest of Sarah's life. She planted the prairie rose, and it grew strong and beautiful, spreading along the front of the house, just as Margaret's roses once had. She taught Jesse to read, and he devoured books like a man dying of thirst. She helped Ruth navigate her new responsibilities as a landowner and watched the young woman grow into someone her mother would have been proud of. And she loved Caleb, every day, in 1,000 small ways. They weathered storms together, literal and figurative. A drought that threatened the cattle, a flood that nearly swept away the barn, a brief terrifying illness that laid Jesse low for 2 weeks. But through it all, they faced each challenge side by side. One evening, as Sarah sat on the porch watching the sunset, Caleb settled into the chair beside her. "You're thinking again," he observed. "Always thinking. About what?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out Thomas's wedding ring. She'd kept it all this time tucked away in a drawer, unable to let it go completely. "I've been thinking about this." Caleb didn't flinch. "Your first husband's ring?" "Yes." Sarah turned it over in her fingers. "I've been carrying it for so long, carrying him, carrying all that grief and guilt and loss. And now—" She looked up at Caleb, and she felt the truth of what she was about to say settle into her bones. "I'm ready to let go." She stood and walked to the edge of the porch where the prairie roses were just beginning to bloom. Carefully, reverently, she dug a small hole in the soft earth. "Goodbye, Thomas," she whispered. "Thank you for loving me. Thank you for showing me what love could be." She placed the ring in the hole. "But it's time for me to move forward now. I hope you understand." She covered the ring with dirt and stood brushing off her hands. When she turned, Caleb was there, his eyes soft with understanding. "You okay?" "I'm perfect." And for the first time in years, she meant it. That night, as they lay together in the darkness, Sarah felt something shift inside her. A final release. A final acceptance. She wasn't the woman who'd traded her ring for bread. She wasn't the widow who'd been thrown out by her husband's family. She wasn't the barren woman they'd called worthless. She was Sarah Thornton, and she was exactly where she was meant to be. Months later, when the spring came again, Sarah stood in the kitchen doorway, watching her family gather for breakfast. Ezra sat at the head of the table, his memory fading, but his smile still warm. Jesse and Ruth sat side by side, their shoulders touching in a way that spoke of young love. Caleb stood at the stove, attempting to make coffee and making a mess of it. "You're doing it wrong," Sarah called. "I know." He grinned at her. "That's why I married you." She crossed the kitchen and took the pot from his hands, and he pulled her close for a kiss. "Get a room," Jesse groaned. "We've got several," Caleb replied. "And we use them frequently." "That's disgusting." "That's married life, boy. You'll find out soon enough." Ruth blushed crimson. Jesse spluttered. Ezra laughed, the bright, clear laugh of a man who knew exactly where he was and who he was with. And Sarah Thornton, standing in the middle of her kitchen, surrounded by the family she'd built from nothing, felt her heart overflow. She'd come to Wyoming with nothing but a ring, a needle, and a broken heart. She'd found something far more precious than gold. She'd found love. She'd found purpose. She'd found home. And that was worth more than all the gold in the world. The silver needle still hung at her collar, a reminder of where she'd been. The rose garden bloomed outside her window, a promise of where she was going. And the ring on her finger. Caleb's ring now told everyone who saw it exactly who she belonged to. Not property, not possession, but partnership, family, love. Gold wasn't what they needed out here. What they needed was each other. And that was exactly what they had.